My name is Jenna Calloway. I am 32 years old. And for 3 years, 2 months, and 11 days, I did not know if my brother was alive. I know the exact count because I kept it, a number in the back of my mind that updated itself every morning without my permission, the way certain kinds of grief do, precise and persistent, and indifferent to whether you want to carry it. Marcus disappeared on a Tuesday in September. No note, no phone call, no warning of any kind. He was there on Monday evening. We had spoken briefly on the phone about nothing important, the way siblings speak when they are comfortable enough with each other not to require occasion, and then on Tuesday morning he was simply gone. His apartment empty. His car left in the parking lot of a grocery store 4 miles from his building. His phone disconnected. I filed a missing persons report within 48 hours. I hired a private investigator 6 months later when the police case had gone cold. I called hospitals, shelters, social services offices in 3 states. I posted on every platform that would have me. I begged anyone who would listen for something, a sighting, a lead, a single piece of information that would tell me whether the person I had grown up with was somewhere in the world still breathing. Everyone told me, gently, and then with increasing firmness, to move on. I never did. And then last week my boss invited me to her home for a team dinner. I parked on her street. I walked toward her front door, through the cool evening air. The neighbor's porch light turned on. A man stepped outside. I stopped breathing. I knew that walk. The particular forward lean of it, slightly left heavy, the result of a high school soccer injury that had never fully healed. I knew the set of his shoulders. I knew the shape of his head against the porch light. He turned and saw me on the sidewalk. He froze. It was my brother. And when he finally told me why he had disappeared, my whole body went numb. But before I tell you what actually happened, please like and subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Now, let's begin. Marcus is 4 years older than me. He is 36 now, which still requires a conscious adjustment. In my mind, he had been frozen at 33, the age he was when he vanished, and allowing him to have kept aging in my absence from his life requires an active act of imagination. We grew up in Naperville, Illinois, the 2 children of Patricia and Gerald Calloway. Our parents were steady, loving people who built a quiet and dependable life and expected their children to do the same. Marcus was the responsible one, organized, reliable, the kid who finished his homework before dinner and remembered everyone's birthdays without being reminded. I was more scattered, more emotional, the one who went wide rather than deep and needed more time to find my direction. Marcus always knew his direction. He studied finance, graduated from the University of Illinois, got a job at an accounting firm in Chicago, and built a modest, stable adult life with the same methodical care he had applied to everything since childhood. He had an apartment in Wicker Park. He had a small group of close friends. He called our parents every Sunday without fail. He called me more than that. We were close in the easy, uncomplicated way of siblings who happened to genuinely like each other. We talked about small things and occasionally large things. We met for lunch or dinner once a month when our schedules allowed. He was, in the most fundamental sense, one of the fixed points of my life, one of the things I did not think to examine because it had always been reliably there. And then it wasn't. The weeks immediately after Marcus disappeared were the most disorienting of my life. The human mind does not process absence well. It keeps reaching for the thing that is gone, keeps expecting the Sunday call, the lunch plan, the occasional text that says nothing important, and finding only a gap where that thing used to be. My parents were devastated in the particular quiet way of people who have practiced composure their whole lives and are encountering something that composure cannot manage. My father drove to Chicago and searched every place Marcus had ever frequented. My mother made calls. I did everything I could think of, and then, when I had exhausted what I could think of, I found a private investigator named Robert Hines who came recommended by a friend and who spent 6 months working the case and found nothing concrete. Not nothing, fragments. Marcus had withdrawn a significant amount of cash from his bank account the day before he disappeared. He had not used any of his cards or accounts afterward. His phone had been turned off and not reactivated on any network Robert could trace. He had told no one at his firm that he was leaving. Robert told me at the end of 6 months that the evidence was consistent with someone who had chosen to disappear rather than someone who had been made to disappear. That the deliberateness of the preparation, the cash withdrawal, the phone, the lack of notice, pointed toward a voluntary disappearance. I asked him what that meant. He said it meant Marcus had not wanted to be found. I sat with that for a long time. And then I set it aside because sitting with it led somewhere I was not willing to go. The idea that my brother had chosen, deliberately and with preparation, to vanish from our lives without explanation was more painful than the uncertainty. I preferred the uncertainty. I kept searching, more quietly than before and without expectation, but I kept searching. I set a Google alert for his name. I checked periodically with the Chicago PD case that remained technically open. I never deleted his number from my phone. 3 years, 2 months, and 11 days. And then my boss, a woman named Catherine Webb, who runs the marketing division of a mid-size healthcare technology company in Indianapolis. I had moved there 2 years earlier for the job, invited the team to her home for a year-end dinner. Catherine lives in a neighborhood called Meridian Kessler on the north side of Indianapolis. It is a quiet, leafy area of older homes and wide sidewalks, and the kind of established calm that comes from a neighborhood that has been itself for a long time without needing to announce it. I arrived at 7, which was on time, and parked 2 houses down from Catherine's because the street was filling up with my colleagues' cars. I was carrying a bottle of wine in my bag and paying attention to not dropping either of them as I came around the front of my car onto the sidewalk. I heard the porch light click on before I looked up. An automatic sensor, the kind that responds to motion. I registered it peripherally and kept walking. And then something made me look. I cannot explain the mechanism of it exactly. It was not a sound. It was something more like a frequency, the sense of something familiar entering your field of awareness before your conscious mind has identified what it is. The body knowing before the brain. I looked up at the porch of the house next to Catherine's. A man was coming through the front door. He was wearing a dark jacket and moving with the forward lean, left heavy walk that I would know anywhere because I had watched it my entire childhood. He was looking down at his phone and had not yet seen me. I stopped walking. I stopped breathing. He looked up. The moment his eyes found me on the sidewalk, he went completely still. His phone dropped to his side. His face, older than I remembered it, and changed in other ways I could not yet name, went through something I cannot describe as any single expression. It was too many things at once. I heard myself say his name, not loudly, almost a question. Marcus. He stood on the porch and looked at me across the small front yard and the sidewalk between us. And he said, in a voice that sounded like someone who had been rehearsing a moment for years and found, when it arrived, that the rehearsal was inadequate. Jenna. I did not go to Catherine's dinner that night. I texted her that I had a family emergency, which was not untrue, and she responded immediately with warmth and sent me away without question. She is that kind of person. Marcus and I sat on his porch for the first hour because neither of us could quite manage the formality of going inside. The night was cool and still, and the street was quiet around us, and we sat in 2 wooden chairs and looked at each other across 3 years of absence that neither of us knew how to begin crossing. He looked well. That was the first thing I registered once the initial shock had settled enough to let me see him clearly. He looked older and quieter, and different in some way I was still identifying, but he looked well. Healthy. Present. I asked him if he knew what the last 3 years had been. He said yes. I asked him why. And then he told me. What Marcus told me on that porch took a long time to get through completely. I will give you the shape of it as honestly as I can. 2 months before he disappeared, Marcus had discovered something in the accounts of a client at the firm where he worked. A pattern of financial transactions that, looked at carefully and in sequence, described something serious. A fraud scheme, systematic and long-running, involving a senior partner at the firm and a network of shell companies. The kind of thing that, if properly reported, would result in criminal charges and the destruction of several powerful careers. Marcus had reported it. Internally first, to the compliance officer he believed he could trust. That had been a mistake. The compliance officer was part of the network. Within a week, Marcus had been approached by a man he did not know who made it very clear, in language that did not require interpretation, that Marcus had a choice between his silence and his safety. He had gone to the FBI. A field office agent had taken his initial statement and told him they would be in touch. While he waited, the threats escalated. Something happened. I will not detail it here because it involves people whose cases are still active that made Marcus understand that waiting was not safe. He made a decision. He withdrew the cash. He turned off the phone. He left. He had not contacted our family because the people who had threatened him had made it clear they knew who his family was. He had calculated, in the agonizing way of a person with no good options, that disappearing completely, from everyone, from our parents, from me, was the only way to keep us safe while the FBI built their case. He had been working with federal investigators for 2.5 years from a location they had helped him establish. Indianapolis. A quiet street in Meridian Kessler. A house next door to a woman named Catherine Webb, whom he had never met until she moved in 8 months ago. The case had concluded 3 weeks before the night I found him on that porch. Charges had been filed. The individuals involved were in custody. Marcus had been told he could resume his life. He had been trying for 3 weeks to figure out how to come back, how to call our parents, how to call me, how to explain 3 years of deliberate silence to the people he had protected by maintaining it. And then I had walked past his porch light on a Tuesday evening, and the universe had made the decision for him. I called our parents from his kitchen that night. It was the hardest and best phone call I have ever made. My mother did not speak for almost a full minute after I told her. My father asked to speak to Marcus, and then could not speak at all for a while, and Marcus sat at his kitchen table holding the phone with his eyes closed. We are a family that is still putting something back together. That work is slow and not always smooth, and there are things about the last 3 years that each of us is still processing. The grief of the absence, the complexity of understanding that it was chosen, even if chosen for the right reasons, even if the choice was made out of love. Marcus moved back to the Chicago area 2 months ago. He is working again for a different firm. He calls our parents on Sundays. He calls me more than that. I have thought a great deal since that night on the porch about what it means to refuse to stop looking for someone. Whether it is love or stubbornness or some combination of the two that cannot be separated. Whether it would have mattered, ultimately, if I had moved on as everyone told me to, whether Marcus and I would have found our way back to each other anyway, in some other moment, on some other street. I think the honest answer is that I don't know. What I know is that I could not make myself stop. That some part of me held the number, 3 years, 2 months, 11 days, not out of grief alone, but out of a refusal to accept that the fixed points of your life can simply vanish without explanation. That people you love do not just cease to exist because you can no longer see them. I was right. He had not ceased to exist. He had been protecting us, in the only way available to him, in a situation that gave him no good choices. And somewhere in a quiet neighborhood in Indianapolis, under a porch light that clicked on when I walked past, he had been waiting, without knowing he was waiting, to be found. Some things you hold on to not because you know how the story ends, but because you are not willing to be the one who lets go. I was not willing.
And it was enough.